Welcome. I'm Nondita Correa Mehrotra, and on behalf of the Charles Correa Foundation, I welcome you to this evening's event, Remembering Charles Correa. Today, on September 1st, on what would have been his 92nd birthday, we have had, we decided to do this, and we've had quite an amazing response to this event. And I think we've had around 1,200 registrations, and I can see that the room is slowly filling up. So, this is a really sort of nice response, and I'm very happy that you could all join. So we begin with a panel discussion of three clients who Charles had worked with to create three important public buildings in his oeuvre. Ashok Vajpeyi of Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal, Jyotindra Jain for the National Crafts Museum in Delhi, and Ajit Kembhavi for IUCA, the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics in Pune. And these buildings, which in each case, the government was the patron, were lucky to have these three amazing people to step in as client. And then, well, after the discussion, which I'm really looking forward to and stuff, but we will have the Charles Correa Gold Medal Award. The gold medal is given to the best thesis project across India. And this year, we had asked them to address the provocation of form follows climate, something Charles was deeply concerned about, had written about, and there's an essay that he wrote, which was published, and we can give you access to that. So, but that was the topic for this year's thesis projects, and the award winners have been selected by a jury of 5 architects, which Suhasini Iyer, Meghal Arya, Arthur Duff, Kapil Gupta, and Rohan Shivkumar. And we will hear from them shortly after the panel discussion. So, and both during the panel discussion and the award ceremony, the audience will be asked to, you'll be able to ask questions, and you should do that by typing them into the chat, and we will answer them time permitting, but we do hope to get through quite a few questions as well from the audience. And before the panelists join, I thought I would do a quick walkthrough of the 3 buildings to introduce them to you, a few images to make you familiar with the buildings. So if I could just share my screen, I can do that and just, okay, so the first building we're going to look at is Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal. This was designed and built between 1975 and 81. And it really came about, I think, because the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had sort of requested every state government to build a Bharat Bhavan. And this was the first of, I think, many of these cultural centers. And it's a beautiful site by the lake, the upper lake in Bhopal. And it's really is a wonderful sort of walk from the street, which is on much higher ground, down to the lake. And really, like, as a public building, it allows you to sort of almost meander through the spaces of the building, but because they're public spaces, they're open courtyards and stuff, that you don't have to necessarily go into the galleries or the performing spaces, but you just could walk through onto these terraces, and this is the kind of the view of the lake as you move down, and you can see the sunken courtyards. This is a section going through, so this on the left hand side is the street level. Going down to on the right is the lake. Here an axonometric explaining how the terracing and the sunken courtyards, and it is through these sunken courtyards then that you can enter the galleries. And so this is a section through where you see these kind of these gallery spaces with the large sort of domes, concrete homes with the skylights. So you get natural light, and they are very, very controlled. And this is 1975. So there's since then I think there's been a lot of discussion about the kind of light and stuff that goes in. But this was trying to bring in this very soft north light nonetheless, but still skylights coming in. This is one of the sunken courtyards, and you can see the relationship of the gallery to the courtyard. Here, people sitting around using those public spaces. Here's the gallery, and so these domes are done in finished concrete and with a waffle slab, and then the skylights with, at that time, fiberglass domes. And then, this is the courtyard with, when the doors are closed, you could still use these spaces. And the amphitheater right by the lake, and then with a performance. The audience is actually facing the lake. This is the National Crafts Museum in Delhi. This was actually started at the same time as Bharat Bhavan in 1975, but this was only finished in 93, so it's almost 18 years. This building takes to really, changing really one architect, but several clients, and we'll talk about that. So it went through many sort of avatars as it finally came together. So this is the entrance. This is the plan, and it's a building that is around the courtyard, very much like Bharat Bhavan, and you have to see it sort of from the inside out, and just trying to sort of diagram what the courtyard's about. And on the way on the right is the triangle, sort of where the entrance arrow. You come in there, and the first red courtyard at the bottom right-hand corner is the entrance courtyard. And then all the crafts are really structured about the patronage, and that's how it's organized. And that was from Mrs. Pupul Jaikar, who said, in talking to Charles, sort of said that's how she thought it should be organized. That's how, because she said otherwise geographically or over time, chronologically, that wouldn't really work because of the diversity of the crafts and stuff. And so her idea was to break it down into village, temple, and darbar, or palace patronage. And so that's what it is. It's as you move from the entrance courtyard to the next three, that's the order that they're in. And then this last courtyard in the way left, the large courtyard, is where craftsmen could come and make and sell their wares. And it was very interesting because then the public could see these crafts being made, but also I think they learned and influenced each other because they brought different skills. And so working together was a different kind of synergy for them. So the Crafts Museum was really quite unique in how these spaces were used and what they were used for. So this is the first of the courtyards, the village courtyard. This is the temple courtyard with this magnificent wooden rath, the chariot. That's the chariot in the scale of that courtyard, towering over, making a connection to the terrace levels above, from which you can also see the Purana Kila, which is a wonderful old ruin in Delhi. Here the Darbar courtyard, the last of the three courtyards, with this wonderful Haveli, and we'll talk about, perhaps Jyotindra will tell the story of how he got the Haveli, and then what had to be changed, and a lot of the building had to be changed to take in all these different objects as they were collected. And so that in itself is kind of interesting, and that relationship of finding things, making changes and working towards sort of finishing the building, or as it grew also. Here are the roof tiles, Rajasthani murals, traditional wall paintings, sort of objects that also sort of created the illusion of the kind of things that one sees in on some of these streets. So here's a wayside shrine that's in the courtyard going towards the village crafts courtyard, and then the pawn shop selling betel nut leaf, and that's partly mural kind of trompe-l'oeil and real objects. And this is the crafts demonstrations that are on the outer wall of the museum. And this is the last of the three buildings, Ayuka in Pune. It's the Inter-University Center of Astronomy and Astrophysics. This was a later building, 1986 to 92. And yeah, so this is on Pune University campus, and it was very, very interesting, as in, I think, to you know, the overlays of sort of contemporary ideas of the universe. And I think this came about just after Charles had completed the building in Jaipur, another cultural center, but this time for the state of Rajasthan, and the Jawahar Kala Kendra. And so this was a different kind of building, a different structure, and this was also an academic building. So it's not a museum, and it's not a cultural center, and but again a public building. So this is the main courtyard, and you can see there's a kind of a formality, and then you feel this kind of energy force as the paving and stuff starts opening up and on the diagonal. This is the plan. It's these two long sinuous walls kind of along the edges, and then you see again the triangles pointing out the entrance between these two concrete columns, and then the three courtyards again moving on a diagonal, but in a very loose kind of relationship between them. And so these are the entrance columns. They're twin columns in exposed concrete, and then they have little sort of touches of blue to the top as they sort of dematerialize towards the sky. And that connection between land and sky, and that is the logo of Ayuka, of the institute. And this is the central courtyard. This was when it was just finished. The peripheral stones resemble the birth of the expanding sort of universe, and the two purple landscapings are the models of an image of the black hole as seen through a radio telescope. So this is what was planted at that time with these large statues of the scientists. And yeah, this is a more recent image of that central courtyard where the trees have grown. It has a completely different mood. The purple landscape still exists, and this is so. These are the statues. The one on the closer to the camera is Aryabhatta, who more than 10 centuries ago established that the Earth was round, and Galileo sort of gesturing up to the dome, and I'll talk about the dome a little more later. Einstein looking up with his pocket watch, and contemplating the relativity of space. Newton sitting under the tree and looking at the fallen apple. The murals on many of the walls explaining this one, Lorentz attractor, which I understand to be a sort of diagramming what happens when what arises in chaotic dynamic systems. So whatever that means, but those are the kind of things that they're around that I think to the scientists mean a lot and make sort of connections to them at least. This is so that some of these things are just in the landscaping, some as murals, some as actually sort of models or working models of this is really this yantra is used to measure the sun's orbit. It's constructed in steel and the wall is masonry and polished granite and other stones, but it's really used to calibrate. It is a functioning instrument. Same with the pendulum, which is near the faculty offices, and this is a dome where the little stars that you can see in this black dome are pinholes through the concrete dome, and they were mapped by the institute representing the night sky on the day the foundation stone was laid. So they actually calibrated the size of every opening and the position of the stars, and that's really it was quite amazing. I remember when the dome was being cast, the kind of everyone was worried about the actual location of everything and that nothing would move in pouring that concrete. And the pattern on the floor is of an ancient Ayurvedic origin, which is mapping the seasons and the constellations. So that's all that I have to share just as an introduction to these three buildings. And we will now meet with the panelists and talk about their relationship with the architecture. So yeah, well, welcome Ashok, Jyotindra, and Ajit. And I'll just do a quick introduction. Ashok Vajpeyi is a poet and art critic. As a Secretary of Culture for the government of Madhya Pradesh, he helped establish the multi-art center, Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal. Jyotindra Jain is a scholar of Indian vernacular arts, popular visual culture, Indian photography, and museum theory. And during the establishment of the National Crafts Museum, he served as its director and for many years after that. Ajit Kembhavi is an astrophysicist who currently serves as the principal investigator of the Pune Knowledge Cluster. He was one of the founding members of IUCA and served as the director till 2015. He's joining us from Seattle, where it's extremely early in the morning. And so very much appreciate you agreeing to do this, Ajit, and to all three of you. Yeah. So, and there are more detailed bios of these very accomplished panelists available on our website. So do have a look, and our website is charlescorreafoundation.org. So this evening, I thought we would really look into the relationship between the architect and client, especially in public buildings, where the patron is the government. And this was really true. The government was the patron for many architectural projects from independence in 1947 all the way through to about the 1980s. But today the government has moved into, really looking at and investing in large infrastructural projects, and so is not so involved in architecture. And so, I thought it would be a good idea to look at that thing, because I think there are lots of young architects who don't even realize that whole sort of moment in time has kind of passed almost, and now patrons are really more in the private sector rather. But anyway, we were going through the archives of the foundation, and we found a short essay Charles wrote for a Bhopal journal of a few years after the building was completed, the Bharat Bhavan was completed. And the essay is titled "The Importance of Being Ashok." And I think he would say this of all three of the panelists today, and I'm going to read a little bit of that of his essay. And he says, in every architect's life, there are some buildings for which you get unfairly damned, and there are some for which you get too much credit. In my case, one which undoubtedly falls into the second category is Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal. For the astonishing success of this art center comes not so much from its design, but from the decisive contribution made by the persons responsible for its running. Without their enthusiasm, judgment, and extraordinary energy, the building would be just so much inert hardware. And he goes on to say that, political events brought it to a standstill. There were many sort of starts and stop kind of things through the thing. A decade later, it was still under construction. Successive changes in the state government had played havoc with the project. Budgets had been cut, then restored, then cut again. The site was changed after the foundations were in, then changed back again, and so forth. As it neared completion, I had lost hope. It was going to be just another government building, neglected and unused. That's when Ashok Vajpeyi arrived on the scene. And, so I was thinking about that, and I know that is true of Ashok's contribution and Jyotindra's as well. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm going to ask Ajit Kembhavi as well, because I think that was a slightly different scenario, and I think we could all learn from these different sort of ways that these clients got involved and why. And so, I think there's a lot to learn from that. So my first question is, to all three of you, is how did you come to be involved in the project, and what brought that about? And maybe Ashok, if you could start, and then we'll go around. And
well, you see, I was working in the realm of culture for Madhya Pradesh for a few years. Bharat Bhavan as an idea was proposed by the government of India in 1972 as one of the things to be done in all states as part of the 25 years of India's independence. Now, Madhya Pradesh was one of the first to accept it. They had promised, the central government had promised that they will contribute financially, but as the year ended, they withdrew, that there will be no financial assistance available. So Madhya Pradesh was the only state which doggedly continued with the project. And we had a brilliant civil servant, M.N. Butch, who in 75 or 76, I was a member of that, member secretary of the committee headed by the chief secretary, but it was Mahesh Butch who brought Charles Correa to design the building. But Charles, for almost 5 or 6 years, was interacting with the chief engineer of the capital project, which was handling the issue. In 1980, the government, Arjun Singh became the chief minister. One of the first things that he did was to create an independent department of culture. And I was made the secretary. So by that time, secretly, I had thought of getting Bharat Bhavan, and towards what was going to happen, I started making schemes. So one of them was to create a state gallery of modern art. Another was to create a state repertory of theatre. Third was to create a world poetry library. Fourth was to create an archive of music. Now, if you see, they were very cleverly designed to occupy Bharat Bhavan, but they were at the moment independent entities. In 1980, I made the government to take two decisions. One, that the building will be constructed by the Department of Urban Development, which was handling it, but the use of the building will be decided by the Department of Culture. That's how I came into the process. And then I was able to persuade J. Swaminathan and B.V. Karant to come. Now, till then, Charles had no idea what's going to happen in the building. There was a very vague idea, diversity of India, which is what? So they would have a corner of Assam and a corner of Bengal and a corner of Tamil Nadu, that kind of a thing. Once these people brought into the picture, the entire building and the structure and the designing changed. Because then we said, we want a space for a museum, not only a museum of urban art, but also for folk and tribal art. We wanted a theatre repertory space, and we wanted a space for the world poetry library, etc. So the interaction between these people and Charles completely changed the structure. Bharat Bhavan was famous as a non-building, in the sense that you enter the building at the roof level, and the building is below, and there's 1 lakh square feet built area, but you don't see anyone. And there are these are these courtyards. There are 2 major courtyards, 3 courtyards. And Charles finally created spaces, and we have used them for theatre. When we had the National Street Theatre Festival, we used many spaces because those spaces were vulnerable to be used. So here was a question of creating spaces and make them in a way vulnerable to multiple uses. So, for instance, there were 2 spaces, one inner theatre and one an outside theatre, of which you showed the slide. But there were 5, 6, 7 spaces other than these assigned spaces for theatre, which were used for theatre and for poetry reading. We did a World Poetry Festival, all kinds of places. We did a National Street Theatre Festival. We did a Sarangi Mela. We did all these. And this space was so constructed that it could be used for these purposes. So it was a remarkable building. In the first year alone, 1 lakh of people visited Bharat Bhavan. We kept the account. because there was a small fee we had introduced. 1 lakh people. At that time, the population of Bhopal was about 10 lakhs. Now, Bhopal is not a famous tourist center. So let's say 10,000 people might have come from outside. 90,000 people, which is 9% of a population, visits a museum and art center. Once I remember, my administrative officer came and they said there are couples which come and sit. I said, what's so wrong with it? Let them sit. Why are you worried? He said, no, but they don't go into the art center. I said, the fact that they find this a space, why not? So I think what the building did, you see, the reputation of Bharat Bhavan was basically whatever we did in the first decade. Now there's a lament, and I think that lament, partly which you have expressed, not only that this government is not interested in public buildings or creating new public buildings, this government is very much interested in destroying the existing public buildings. If not physically, although they have a bulldozing enthusiasm, they are seeing to it that these buildings are distorted. They are being used for purposes for which they were not meant to be, or they are being thrown into, you paint them, or you create some cementing, or I don't know what. So it's a for me, it's also an occasion for lament. A great building built by one of our greatest architects, which stood the test of energy, imagination, popularity, everything, has been reduced to nothing. Charles said when the opening of the Bharat Bhavan that almost everybody who mattered in Indian culture and art was there.
There for the opening.
Yeah. And now it has become a regional center, which nobody bothers. So the buildings which were capable of great intervention on the cultural scene have been reduced. And this is true about Crafts Museum as well. Of course, Jyotindra Jain will tell you.
In fact, Jyotindra also stepped in and sort of saved the day. But I remember, Jyotindra, you want to talk about that first meeting when Pupul Jaikar, I think, brought you in, right?
Yeah. I came in when the Crafts Museum building was commissioned, and very, very fortunately for us, as for also Bharat Bhavan, that as we all know, that government is not it's not an individual, it's an abstract entity, a faceless kind of body. Within that, if you leave it to the government, all sorts of things happen to the building. But we were very fortunate, perhaps the same individual as Pupul Jaikar with Ashok's case. In our case also, Pupul Jaikar was the chairperson of the Crafts Museum. Not only that, but she was also advisor to Prime Minister for all the cultural matters. So this building was commissioned before I came into the picture. I was abroad for 9 years and not known much about it. So when I came back, I did a museum in Ahmedabad for the Sarbais, and Pupul Jaikar happened to come there, and she liked it immensely, and she said, "What is your plans?" I said, "I'm going back, I've finished my project." So she said, "No, but it's such a beautiful museum you created. Why don't you stay on?" She said. So it was a completely new thing in my plan I was to go back, I was to teach at a university and things. But I was so taken by the idea that I said, okay, I will stay and let's think what we can do. So then I went to Delhi, and I saw the building that had begun, but only 15 or 20% of it was built, and Charles then abandoned the building. That's what Mrs. Jaikar told me, that because he was finding to deal with the bureaucracy so difficult, despite Pupul Jaikar being there. So, for example, he wanted to install a large or a medium-sized haveli, and that courtyard outside which you showed, that was to relate to that Courtly Crafts gallery. And he could not get the haveli from my predecessor for about 2 years. So Charles said, I'm not doing this work, he left it. Then I was appointed eventually, and I was asked whether you can get a haveli. So I said, yeah, I spent some years in Gujarat before that with Sarabhais and traveling all over Gujarat. So it's an area of carved wooden havelis. So I said, yeah, I can get that. And Charles, then there was a meeting, Charles, Martin Singh, Rajiv Sethi, Popul Jaikar, we all were there, Secretary Culture, Secretary Textile. And then I was asked, Charles asked me, he didn't know me. He said, how your predecessor took me for a ride for 2 years. How long will you take me for a ride to get a haveli? So out of looking at his anger and my own pride, I said, in 1 month. So it was, I promised more than I could, but since I had promised, I went to Gujarat and identified a beautiful haveli, which was not a protected monument, because northern Gujarat is spotted with such havelis. So there was, and then these havelis were being brought to Gujarat. The pillars and the carvings and jalis and all are being turned into coffee tables and all sorts of things. That was the ethnic revival of what was the time when furniture and things were made from broken pieces of carved wooden havelis. So it was nothing wrong that I got. So I got the haveli. And I sent a message to Delhi to Mrs. Jaikar that I got this. So she said, very good. So get it across. That time I met both Rahul Mehrotra and Arthur Duff. And I found that somebody wanted to stop this haveli to come to Delhi and tried to get the Archaeological Survey of India to put a ban. But so many of them, better ones, are scattered and there's no ban on them. So I was but that was a Friday. And I found out, I heard that it was, so within Friday and Saturday and Sunday, I got the haveli measured. Arthur went to the haveli, and then he took lots of photographs and sent and by the time Monday, when the ASI could have made a move, so they could not have made because there are many such, but even so. And the haveli was in moving on 2 trucks to Delhi, and we got the haveli as I had promised. Now the importance is not only this has something to do with architect-client relationship. First of all, Popul Jaikar was so determined that this is done. She said, you come and do this, because she saw my work in Ahmedabad. And more than that, I think she was determined that this building comes up, and only Charles Correa does it. The brief that is to be given to the architect was primarily, as you also mentioned, was prepared by Popul Jaikar. Then certain alterations happened, which should happen and happen later on. So this is what, within government, and government is the official client, that through intermediaries like Ashok or like others, who could. So there is a scope in the government if there is the right person at right place. So Popul Jaikar was that time, it happened to be so that, and then she let me not go abroad. And that was another reason I stayed on now, how many years that before I was
your life. Yeah. But Ajit, yeah, sorry. No,
yeah.
I was just.
So this is how I think the building came up. I think one issue would be in this on the topic of relationship between client and architect is what happens to the relationship in the biography of the building. You build a building, everything happens, but over the years, I mean, a big problem in India is not only while constructing, there can be so many obstacles, as I said, but maintenance of the building, keeping it up. Now, to understand, keeping up or maintenance doesn't mean that it's just so sacrosanct that just it remains like that, it decays but remains. It's not so. But again, when the building is 15 years old, when it grows in its life, then things happen. and these things also need to be brought in. But what craft museum people, after my leaving, were doing was that initially we contacted Charles's office, and you know it, you were there that time, and
Yeah.
we took advice and did certain alterations. But later on, it's not a problem. The problem is that the bureaucrats who were running the museum after me, they would if they would put their foot down, I don't mind. Maybe as bureaucrats they have an argument, but if they say that this is what will look better, you do this, then, and the whole aesthetic. So
Yeah.
this is, I think, in India, a major problem, that most bureaucrats, they insist on the aesthetics of the thing. I'm not saying I as director, but okay, you appoint a committee, do something. But so this is what is influencing the lives of the building. And crafts museum, where or maybe I stop and we get Professor Kembhavi, and then we come back to, I want to talk about the narrative of the what you said, courtyard passage. What is the whole architectural narrative, and therefore what is the narrative for the visitor? We'll
Mhm.
come to that in the second round.
Okay. Thanks. So Ajit, I was going to ask you that, I think IUCA was different. It was also a government project, but
Yeah.
I think you all had a very different relationship right from the beginning, that you all could step in. And I was just wondering, what did you all do differently in setting that up? Was that something that you all sort of foresaw, or was there yet this? I mean, your building for one was built much faster. I mean, both Crafts Museum and Bharat Bhavan took over a decade, each of them, to
Yeah.
get built, mainly because there was no one actually at the helm.
So, Nondita, thank you very much for inviting me to this very exciting event. And I've not thought about these matters for many years, but I go to the building quite often. It was a great opportunity for all of us. Now, first of all, the person who comes closest to being the client is Professor Jain,
Yes.
the famous astrophysicist. And what happened was that Professor Yashpal, who was at that time the chairman of the University Grants Commission, asked Professor Nalika to set up a new institute for astronomy, and we should be a meeting center for all people from the universities who are interested in astronomy. But it also had to be a world-class center for doing astronomy. Right. So then, as it happened, Professor Nalika had met Charles at a meeting in Hyderabad just some months before this idea first came into being. So he asked me and my colleague, Professor Naresh Dadij. I was at the time with Jain Nalika in the Tata Institute in Bombay, and Naresh Dadij was at the university. And we had got involved very early in the project. And then he asked us to go and meet Charles. Now, as it happens, there have been a lot of architects in my family. And I've been talking to architects from the age of 3 or so. So and then I'd heard of Charles Correa, and I was extremely excited about the prospect of actually meeting with him and possibly working with him. And so Naresh and I went there to his office in the afternoon, I remember. And I was still in Bombay in those days, in Mumbai. And then we had a wonderful meeting. And Charles had this idea of working on some building which had to do with contemporary astronomy, as opposed to the ancient astronomy that he had dealt with before. Mm-hmm. And so he thought that this was a great opportunity. And we did not have any clear idea in mind, because the entire concept had to be developed on our feet. It had to be done very fast. And so we got talking about it. And as you know, Charles can be very expansive. And since the universe is very large, there's a lot of space to expand it. Okay, so the idea started evolving. And then we kept thinking about how the building should be. And he had first divided into 5 different parts which are connected by corridors. And I remember one afternoon he said, no, I'm going to stick all those parts together. It becomes an integrated whole. And then with a lot of these kunds there, in it. And then the design evolved. And the point was that we established a very good working relationship with him. I mean, as you know, he could be really difficult with clients that he did not like or could not get along with. And but we quickly figured out how to work with him because we ourselves are difficult people on occasion. So, but the two difficulties in this case, they sort of became something very positive. And then he was a very warm person, and he was older than me by about 20 years, I think, but he was a very warm person, and we quickly became friends. So then it was very easy. And he told us quite early in the game that you have to tell him what we needed. And we had to tell him what was the function of what we needed. And then you have to leave it to him to decide what was the best way of actually implementing that idea, that need. Okay, so that things worked very well. And we had this idea. It was, I one day thought of it, saying that, look, it's going to be very easy, much easier to build houses than to make the office building. So it was decided to build the housing first and going to act as offices. And then we had to build we wanted a shed in which we could start work. And he said he didn't want the shed. And he said that then one day he asked me, what will the shed be after? Because you people are never going to pull it down. What will be after? So I remember I gave him three alternatives. I remember only two of them. One was the Dhobi Ghat. Okay, the other place where we could have buffaloes. So he liked all the three ideas. He said, okay, well, let's have the shed. And we decided to call it Aditi. And then that shed still stands, but it's being used as a telephone exchange for the BSNL and as well as until recently as a creche. So the building developed quite fast, and everything just came together because we were used to working, let's say, to a timetable, and then the University Grants Commission gave us a completely free hand, and there were some hot exchanges sometimes, and and I remember there was a particular meeting. And in which the then secretary of the UGC said, "In लोगों को जो करना है करने दो, सब हमारे मायने से ही बनेगा." And so at that point, Jain was generally a very calm person. But like around, I mean, I have known him now for a very long time. And about once every few years, he becomes furious about something or the other. And that day he became very furious. And after that, there was no opposition to anything that he wanted. So the building came into being and it was inaugurated by Professor S. Chandrasekhar, and was a Nobel laureate. And then he came there for the inauguration, and the inauguration consisting of just setting the Foucault pendulum in motion. And another person who was present there, there were many artists, and of course there were very famous scientists present there, but there were many artists and other people. And then Gangubai Hangal was there, who was a great singer. And she just couldn't believe that the pendulum was actually in Ayuka. She kept saying that it is in NASA and it has been set in motion using radio. So there were a lot of contrasting ideas and opinions at that time, but it all came together. And because of Professor Nalikar's influence and the hard work which the growing team did, it did develop into a world-class place quite soon. And then people from the university started coming in. And it has had a very major impact on astronomy in India. But I believe that the influence of the building has been very great. Okay, when people come into the building and then they look at the spaces, they become very calm and they feel that there's something very special. And the fact that they have access to this very special building, and in fact, they partly own it. And that has been the great motivator. And now my colleagues are looking after it, and they're doing a very good job of it. Because as you said yourself, one of the few things that have changed is the trees have grown very much, okay, which have changed the ambience. But I mean, things are all right. Occasionally, a color changes its shades, and which it shouldn't be doing. But those are small things. So people still take a great pride in the building. And I believe that programs like this, where people come together and talk about why that building was made in the way that it was, and the great contribution of the architect to the institute. Okay, it's not only to the creation of the building, but to the institute, and also the contribution of the clients at that time, and also the subsequent users of the building to keeping it in the great form that it is now have been incredibly important. And that has now lasted for 3 decades. But the question is, how do you keep it going it for centuries? So we have all been associated with institutes which have been around for several hundred years, and hopefully this kind of an idea will also prevail, and these buildings in one form or other will be there in the long term. So, I mean, there are a couple of other things to say, but I can come back to them later. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. In fact, I was just going to ask you, what do you think was the sort of moment where, you know, your sort of your best memory of this kind of collaboration? What do you think? Because I think Charles loved talking. He used to talk a lot, but mainly he loved to discuss things. It was always kind of idea driven, that, you know, I think with all 3 of you, he had a very nice rapport, and Professor Nardekar as well, of course. But, you know, this kind of nice thing of being able to discuss ideas and find some manifestation of that in the building. And if we could just sort of talk about what you remember as sort of in some ways the most important one, or several of them, I don't know, but yeah, just it would be nice to get a sense of that. Yes, Ashok, yeah, sorry.
You know, once Charles was in Bhopal after Bharat Bhavan has been inaugurated and was well on its way to cultural dynamism. And Kumar Gandharv also used to be, I mean, had to be, was in Bhopal. So we invited both of them to dinner at our place. And somehow the conversation veered around Chandigarh, La Kabuzi. And Kumar Gandharv said that he had been there and he composed a new bandish and a new rag called, I think, some Bihag, some version of Bihag. And he sang a line of it. And the bandish was, this is a play of forms, and someone with great patience plays this game. And I translated this for Charles. And he said, you know, Le Corbusier said that architecture is a game of patience. And did Kumar Gandharv know about it? I think, no, there's no way that he would have known about this. So there was this, you know, this strange energy which operated. I think he created a space in the courtyard, the other spaces, which were spaces for evocation, for expression, for joy, for participation, for there was no distance, as it were, between the artist and the audience. The audience was part of the performance in such spaces. And that, I think, was a great value, because you have spaces in the modern sort of auditoria where the artist sits so far away. Charles created a space of intimacy, of close interaction, and it worked remarkably. I remember once we had a whole thing on Bhimsen Joshi, and Kumar Gandharv suddenly arrived without notice. And the whole thing got so electrified, and there was such a lot of energy in it. And I think the building contributed a lot to this. The structures, the spaces, the interactions, and the ambiance of intimacy that it evoked was due to the building, not merely through the art.
Right.
Yes, I think so.
Jyotindra, you want to?
Yeah. Since we have less time, I'll talk about why this building succeeded so much, and also Charles's understanding of culture besides architecture. As you mentioned and showed some visuals in the beginning, that as I say, that there is a passage where from you enter, then there's a courtyard, then there's a passage, then there's a courtyard, there's a passage, and there's a courtyard. So this kind of movement and around both sides of the courtyard and the passage, there are galleries. Like in a village street, it would be both sides. There would be shops and houses and etc. Taking that for a metaphor, I think the building was designed, but it worked beautifully because of Charles's understanding of culture, which often we hierarchize. That tribal is lower, temple is higher, courtly is even much higher. So we build a hierarchy. This issue, I remember we discussed when this was going on. Not that I influenced it, he had a thing, but we discussed this issue, that how this happens, that there is the hierarchy is broken. Now, in many museums, you enter a gallery, then you automatically that gallery leads you to another gallery, and then to another gallery. So automatically a kind of hierarchy is established. Suppose from tribal to something, but one here the central spine of the building free which gallery to enter, depending upon the visitor's desire. And I think breaking of this cultural hierarchy through architecture, and consciously doing so, because I remember we had discussed this issue, I think this was extraordinary. Ashok has talked about music, so I want to bring in the word jugalbandi. I think the architect and the client, there has to be a kind of jugalbandi.
Yes,
So when we
yes.
were doing this building, Charles said that what do we do with the village courtyard? So I said, would you like to put a tulsi chora, the planter? And he said, oh, that's a great idea. So we got a tulsi chora. Next one, he said, I want an old temple, stone temple, which is going into Narmada perhaps, or whatever. Can we get one such? So I said, it is difficult to get an old temple, but what do you want to do? He said, I want it to come out of the building, and from outside, from the outer profile of the building should show this rising above the courtyard. So I thought how to do it practically. And then I went to Gujarat, and I found that there was a chariot, wooden chariot, available for sale. And this chariot had a height much higher than, and was easier to bring. And because it was sold privately by a temple, and they had advertised its sale. So I bought it, and on a truck, the chariot was traveling with its spire and all to Delhi. And thirdly, when we did the temple, aristocratic courtyard, there I managed to get a huge facade of a large haveli, which we installed over there. Then we put that lovely pigeon house there and planted a tree. So these three courtyards were done. And in the passage, as I said, was supposed to have been village street, metaphor for village street. So we put pawn shop, we put wayside shrine, we gorged with big eyes and vermilion painted. Life of a museum, all this is gone. There's no wayside shrine, there's no pawn shop. And one of the secretaries told me, what is this nonsense? It's unaesthetic that you put a pawn shop, you put an art object. What do I say? And then I remember Bhupen Thakkar, the known artist. he had done an installation of a pawn shop long back, independently of craft physics. And when that came back to India after his exhibition, he offered this to Crafts Museum free. And I think I would have liked to have it, because Bhupen was even Pan Spittle, he would show in his installation.
Yes, yes.
Instead of
You're so right. You're so right.
then Bhupen's work. So, but I was snubbed by the secretary in charge that what are you doing? We thought you had better taste than this. And I realized I really didn't have better taste than this. This was the ultimate that I would have done.
Yeah,
Ajit?
so, yeah, you see that like Charles had the habit of changing his designs on the spot, because he would stand there and then keep making changes. And then we agreed to most of them. Some of them were rather expensive, but they definitely added to the quality of the building. But one thing which was forced upon us was that in a particular courtyard near the library entrance, there were 2 trees. And we had transplanted about 50 banyan trees and put them from one location on the side to other locations, and we had forgotten to transplant these 2 trees. And then Charles and I were there, and then he said, "These 2 trees have to go." I said, "No." He said that we are not going to cut any trees. Then he said, "Give me an idea of what could be done." So I had got an instantaneous idea. I said that, look, supposing each one of these trees were a star with a certain mass, there'll be a gravitational field around it. And then that gravitational field has a particularly nice and interesting pattern. So let us make that pattern. And then he liked the idea very much. And these are called the Roche lobes. And those are made. And then it was found that the contractor had made them, they had not positioned them properly. So they're looking horrible. So they're to be torn down, and again they had to be made. And these are just designs in the ground with stones. And they started looking absolutely wonderful. It's a combination of stone and vegetation. And then there are 5 specific points here, and which are called the Lagrangian points. And I thought it would be nice to represent each one of those points with a brass disc. So where do we get the brass disc from? And then on that we need to have in writing L1, L2, etc. to L5. And then somebody told me that you should go to Panganti Chowk in Pune. It's an ancient place, and then there's a shop owned by the Pangantis. And then I went there and I said, I need these discs. They said, "Theek hai, mahina, 1.5 mahina lagel." That's more than about a month and a half. I said, "I want them day after tomorrow." And they said, "No." So I said, "Please come with me." And I brought him to the building and showed him what I wanted those for. And then they got them ready by the day after that we wanted. Okay, so then what happened was that the central disc is known as the L1 point, which is at the center of the pattern. And some years later, the then President Abdul Kalam had come to the building. As it happened, he came to our auditorium, which is on the other side of the building, 3 times that day for 3 different events. And we thought, as a courtesy, we should invite him. And his protocol people gave us, I believe, 2 minutes. He said he'll just come inside, say hello, and go back. And then as soon as he came in, he saw Aryabhatta's statue, and he said, "I want to see that properly." And he came in, and then he had a tour of the building. And all his other people became very furious with us. But then when he saw the point L1, he actually went and stood on it and spread his arms, because he was familiar with its significance, and we took a photo. I don't know where it is now, but I think it will be a great photo. So there are many such instances where we have to interact together and think of new ideas. And that is what gave the building its quality. The fact that the client and then think should work together. And as it was already said, it was a nice jugalbandi. You see, sometimes there can be an orchestra, and the orchestra can become cacophony. So we finished the building before we came to that stage.
Yeah.
Nondita, can I have one sentence?
Yes, of course, yes.
Yes. When I mentioned the chariot, the haveli, the pigeon house, the carved wooden doors and windows and things, I want to clarify that both I and Charles were very conscious that we are not doing some kind of a traditional ethnic revival. It's a modern building in which these things have emerged as quotes. They're quotes from other places. but still it doesn't become an ethnic building. And Charles would never have done it. And I think I also was not trying to do that. But these were rooted in crafts and things, but they've appeared in the building as quotes reminding us of certain tradition. Thank you.
As part of the exhibits more than as the architecture itself. But there are a few questions from the audience, and maybe we have time just actually for one of them. From Yash Srivastav, he says, Charles had a great sense of humor. Can any or all of you narrate a humorous moment during the course of the designing, building of your projects? If anyone wants to answer that, if you remember anything.
Well,
I remember one.
Okay.
When our interactions were going on, and Swami Nathan and Karant had joined in, suddenly Charles said, "Ashok, you are grabbing the building."
Yes.
I said, "Yes, that is my clear intention. I want to occupy this building through these people. It is a case of building grab." And the note that you read from mentions this.
Yes. Yeah.
Case of building grab. The building which was not meant originally, at least, so it's a case of building grab. And he laughed and he said, "Yes, you have it."
He often quoted that. He used to think it was amazing because you came in and took over the whole thing and really made it what it is as a building, and yeah, I think he was very grateful for that. Sorry. And Jyotindra, you must be having something up your sleeve of some moment. No.
well, do we have time or questions?
Yeah, a quick round if you do remember something. Yeah.
I don't know whether I should, but I'm saying this with great hesitation, and I'm not mentioning names, but not related to Crafts Museum, but related to establishment of a museum and cultural center in Jaipur, not Jawahar Kala Kendra, but also part of that. We were both in Jaipur, and there happened to be a rally of old cars. So each one was brought by different Maharaja from different places of Rajasthan. And we sat in one Maharaja's car who had a habit of carrying a spittle with him, a spittoon with him. And we started, and the spittoon fell on my foot, so my neighbor, the Maharaja, was very embarrassed. He took out a napkin and wiped it. So when he saw it later in the evening, Charles made a sketch of that. And he was so amused by this, that this suddenly happened. And that so I still have the sketch with me if you want once.
Oh gosh.
So I remember a moment
Yeah.
in which Charles was actually left embarrassed. Now, what happened was that here I had gone to see M.F. Hussain in his M.F. Hussein's home because Charles wanted Hussain to make a big mural here on the Ayuka building. And then at one point we were discussing it with him, and of course we had no money to pay him, so we tried to get it free from him. And then Charles said to Hussain, why don't you just loan it to them? And then Hussain looked at him and said, "Charles, have you loaned the design to them or they paid you for it?" Okay, so that was the end of the conversation. It didn't go much further afterwards. So.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think for him, these buildings, I think both private and public were well, I suppose it happens to most architects. they become so much part of you. It's tough to sort of let go. And I suppose in this case of Hussein saying he meant it in a way to he wanted something good for the building, and and everything he put into each of these buildings was things that he really I mean, he really cared for them. I think he never really left them in any way. He would always go back. If he was in Delhi, he would go back to the Crafts Museum or go to Ayuka or Bharat Bhavan or whatever. It was always going back and visiting those buildings, meeting with people. And I think both the relationships he had with the clients and with the buildings stayed with him. Those were like really important to him. So, but thank you so much for this discussion, and I hope we can perhaps continue this even just meeting in person. It's a kind of a nice oral history as well for us at the foundation. It's thank you.
I think we should separately record this in future sometimes.
Yeah, no, we'll do that, because I'm sure each of you have much longer stories, and
a lot of stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice if we could do that. But thank you very much for coming in today and sharing this with us.
It's a pleasure for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or no?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there questions?
I don't know. I don't think there are more questions. So yeah, that was most probably, I would imagine we'll get questions later as all this soaks in. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And we're going to go on now to the award ceremony. And I just want to sort of on the second part of the evening, and the medal that we give, the Charles Correa Gold Medal, is given to an undergraduate thesis, as I said earlier, and really from any of close to now, I think there are almost 500 architectural colleges across India. And the gold medal was started about, I think, 25 years ago, Charles had started it. And first was just a few schools in Mumbai and Goa. And at that time, I think the boards used to have to actually come in. So students would draw on these large, big, boards, and they would have to be physically brought in. So we kind of were limited to those spaces. And more recently, because we could go digital, we decided to expand it. And last year, the foundation for the first time took over. Before that, the UDRI, the Urban Design Research Institute, which is something else, that foundation that Charles had started many years ago. They used to administer the gold medal, but we started doing this last year, and because it's digital, we invited schools from all over the country. Not all of them came, but it was a good pool of student theses. And we had asked them to focus on ecologically sensitive architecture using, as I said, the provocation that Charles used to use of form follows climate. And we invited the jury of 5 architects, and I'm going to turn it over to them. Kapil Gupta, who's the co-founder of Siri Architects and principal here in Mumbai. He was director of the UDRI some years ago, and he served as a visiting critic at numerous schools of architecture across India, and on several juries and for competitions and design awards. And he was Kapil was chairman of the jury Suhasini Iyer is an architect and urban planner, and works out of Oroville at the Oroville Center for Scientific Research. She also heads the Oroville Design Consultants, a design firm. Rohan Shivkumar is an architect, urban designer, and filmmaker, and he practices in Mumbai, and is dean of the School of Architecture at the Kamala Raheja School. Arthur Duff has 30 years experience as an architect, an interior designer, furniture designer, and he is part of Studio Praxis in Ahmedabad. And as you heard from Jyotindra, he was involved with measure drawings for the Haveli at the Crafts Museum. So that was in another avatar of Arthur's, I think, when he was a student. Meghal Arya is an educator and a practicing architect, and she teaches design and history at CEPT, at the Faculty of Architecture at CEPT. So I'm going to now hand it over to the members of the jury, and they're going to give away the awards. So Kapil, Arthur, you want to join?
Okay, I
Hi.
think I'll. Yeah, Rohan is not joining us. Kapil, you start or I start or?
Sure. I mean, you can start, Suhasini, no problem.
Okay, so good evening, everybody, and it's really pleasure to be with these fantastic jury members. I learned a lot from them. I'll start with the second honorable mention. It's Architecture for a Future, an exploration in dynamism and transience. This was submitted by Supreet L. Suresh, who is from the School of Architecture of Vadiyar Center in Mysuru, and advisor Shreyas Bandhu. This provocative project proposed adaptive reuse as a strategy to renew and repurpose an abandoned building in the city, thus ensuring the full use of the embodied energy. In stark opposition to the logic of speculative real estate, where erasure and new construction is a norm, this project invests in embodied carbon conservation of the old structure. It also proposes the use of construction waste to further mitigate its carbon footprint. Adaptive reuse is increasingly adopted globally as a viable use of carbon already embedded in the building, besides helping in urban regeneration. While the proposal requires more rigorous design development, we would like to applaud this entry with a citation, as it forsakes market-led formalism for a thoughtful response to its site and a relevant response to climate change.
Good.
Hi, what's your thesis about? It's about. Hi, what's your thesis about? It's about architecture for the future. What does it have to do with form follows climate? Essence of placemaking, majorly discussed in the thesis, where it's easier to understand as chapters and characters. Beginning of the end, where we talk about how we're using Earth's resources and letting it die, and majorly the reason is us, architects. Conversation with the future is basically architects giving future ideas like walking city, floating city to survive. Fujimoto explains it as a nucleus which doesn't have an inside and an outside. Talks about two major things, which is the primitive hut and the cave, which was more sustainable. Tea room changes its form according to the event, and the whole Kastura Palace becomes like an organism for a function, where another example of Torre David, the whole building, which is vertical slum, was meant to be an office. What are these nothing to universal spaces? We look at Kulbus and Jain's thematic spaces of India to understand deeper value of it. It becomes permanent, where Rahul Mehrotra talks about how kinetic cities have made, how the event changes the city. Shed in New York changes his form according to the event. A simple thinai could be so much more. Sangless fig, where the seed consumes a whole host tree and becomes a new thing. If we do that in architecture, we understood two kind of spaces, and the third one is the adaptive and ever-changing one. For design, we chose a city in India which is ever-changing, fast-growing, which produces a lot of dead spaces such as malls, and the seed is placed for the building to adapt and ever change for the coming event. Design tools are used. For more detail, look at the panel presentation. Thank you.
Atha,
Kapil, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's been a great pleasure being part of this jury process, and I'm very happy to present the first honorable mention. It is to AI and X Paradigm Research Center by Ame Rashkar, and from the school SMEF's Brick School of Architecture in Pune, under the advisor Ninad Rewatkar. This insightful proposal for an environmental research center foregrounds the computational intelligence of building diagnostic software as a tool to enable and evaluate passive design strategies while creating a vibrant urban realm for users and the city. The project deploys a set of procedural transformations to a generic volumetric grid of programs. The addition and subtraction of grid modules is rationalized by computational optimization for daylight penetration, thermal mass efficiency, and cross-ventilation, besides the cogent organization of institutional programs. The typological repetition of elemental public spaces generates a surprisingly porous building with human-scaled green terraces and open-to-sky voids that facilitate an intimate visual connectivity across the campus. Well done.
The project being an AI research center intends to take an approach of merging solar passive design strategies and AI technology to find a symphony which keeps the design rooted to the principles but with an aim to reach higher through technology. The 5 departments for AI plus X was healthcare, agriculture, education, smart city, and smart transportation with a mix of artificial intelligence. According to the site selection criteria, Pune and further Hinjewadi was selected to be the area for the site. Blue indication as the site with neighboring major collaborative industries. The final site. 9 case studies done to understand various aspects of design along with campus design principles of architect Ajit Kembhavi helped me make a framework for designing. Solar passive design strategies, northeast-southwest orientation to find a mix of sun shading and cross ventilation. Voids and gaps in the structure to aid cross ventilation to all blocks. The southwest massing raised in height and northeastern blocks decreased in height for additional shading. More cutout and voids in the structure would promote daylighting and green spaces would act as a buffer between spaces, with additional circulation through voids. Core of the structure acting as a vertical architectural element, also helping in shading and reducing the heat load. Evaporative cooling strategies used on the ground level. AI automated constraints, 5 axial primary lines. Secondary axis based on wind direction and midpoints. Plugging in the case study constraint of radial zoning. Automated a constraint when 90-degree intersection nodes will have courts with a gap of 9 meters between them. To promote the invert planning and placement of trees where the trees are placed on the axial lines. Core plan for optimum fire escape distance. And finally, the designer induced constraints to form a hierarchy between spaces and to add the final touch of detail. A diagram showing the massing. 3D massing of the entire plot.
thank you. I will now read out a jury statement. that we have put together. The Charles Correa Gold Medal seeks out compelling visions for the future of the built environment across architecture colleges in India. This year, the gold medal addresses the urgency of climate-responsive architecture. Korea's lucid intuition, form follows climate, is remarkably pertinent today, a moment where the construction industry is a significant contributor of global warming across, or rather accounting for almost 25% of all global carbon emissions. The award challenges students and institutions now to rewrite the values of the discipline and the profession, to foreground the strong environment-led framework of thinking and making if we are to confront the challenges of living in the Anthropocene. So the 46 entries for the Charles Correa Gold Medal 2022 revealed increasing awareness among students on the implicit role that the construction industry plays in global warming. The entries express various architectural and planning solutions, from interesting passive design strategies to impressive technical simulations to understand and optimize how buildings consume resources, energy, water, recycle waste, and even landscape strategies to create food security. So we will unfortunately not be awarding the Charles Correa Gold Medal this year. And we would like to encourage students to seek out new ideas and methods of thinking and building sustainably within the diverse environmental, cultural, and social landscapes of the subcontinent. This was not an easy decision, unfortunately, but I think we really want the award to go to a very special project. And we quite clearly felt that there was a kind of disconnect. We saw very, very competent proposals when it came to quality of presentation work, quality of drawings. But I think we all felt that just in terms of content, in terms of context, that the proposals were not fully developed. I think even in the case of the last project, we believe that it would have been the first honorable mention. We thought was, a very, very competent project. But we wish that there was more time to spend, developing probably the elevations of the building, because that is such an important aspect of how buildings modulate, heat, lights, and and in a sense, become a very important aspect of the architecture. So unfortunately, we will not be giving the gold medal out. I'd also like to now ask other members of the jury who were part of the decision to say a few words, and we can take some questions from the audience after that. Arthur, we can't hear you.
Beg your pardon. Sorry. This competition is a wonderful opportunity for students to extend themselves in terms of these very, very pertinent and relevant issues. And it's also an opportunity for colleges to understand and see how they can go beyond the limits of what is required for a thesis presentation. And I would join, I think we all agree that there was a very significant effort made on everyone's part, but we would like to maintain a very high bar of expectation such that this medal competition opportunity will generate more significant results in the future.
Meghal?
Thank you. I think it was a very, very interesting discussion that we all had as jury members. And many of the entries were definitely trying to address the role that an architect might play in this really complex and rather very difficult problem that we face today, where I felt that I think technology and technocracy were kind of overwhelming the responses rather than their spatial and architectural responses. And I think it's a good moment for all of us and all of the student body and colleges and institutions of architecture to really find where does an architect locate themselves in this kind of global issue. Thank you.
Suhasini?
Thanks, Kapil. I would like to start with the positive note. All the 46 presentations, there are certain things that I found quite amazing. I mean, as Kapil said, and also Meghal mentioned, the kind of mastery of the presentation and the technology that was coming through in all the presentations was quite amazing. And the ability to put forward the idea on a conceptual level was also there. And one could see between the case studies and the designs is where the linkages were starting to fray a bit. We had intensive discussions between the 5 of us, and there were a couple of common thought processes that were emerging. One was, of course, what Meghal said about the spatial aspect of it, but there was also the feeling that there was a kind of a bit of a disconnect between the subject matter of the thesis and the intent of the Charles Correa Foundation, which is form follows climate. And anybody who is a bit familiar with the intent behind the statement and looking at the personality and the output and the engagement that Charles Correa had, it was much more than architecture. It was an engagement of society, built form, politics of development. And over and above all this is the spirit of constantly synthesizing between the various aspects that goes into an architect's work of reinterpreting and envisioning actually the next step for the society. So it's a formal spatial intervention, but behind that formal and spatial intervention, there is an engagement of the intangible, which is the society, the economics, the culture, and the climate, and all this context that goes into somehow being informed and formed by the climate. Many of us felt that maybe this disconnect was not completely due to the lack of effort from the student, but maybe a kind of a combination of between the curricula, faculty, the engagement that the student has, and the way architecture is practiced, and that filters down into the academia. Maybe we all need to take a good look at how we engage and our output as architects into the society that we belong to. So in a way, not actually awarding the gold medal is a statement not just of the work that we reviewed, but also a statement of our own engagement with architecture and society as it stands today, especially when we are so challenged globally on all levels. So I think for me, it works both ways. Maybe the student work was not so great, but I don't think that we also had something fantastic that we are putting out. So I think we're all in the same boat in a way. We are all challenged, and we need to relook at it, and we need to re-envision our role in society and how, as architects, we synergize with these challenges and do our best. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhasini. Rohan, any words from you?
Kapil, Rohan is not joining us. He's right now in
I
Oroville
see. I
somewhere.
thought he came on because he had this.
No. I asked him
Problem.
today afternoon, and he said he's not joining because he's giving a lecture at the Pondicherry University.
I see. So, are there any questions from the audience? Would we like to carry this conversation forward?
Would it just in relation to the discussions that we had and the concern for this issue, is it worth mentioning that what will the focus of the award be next year, and that this discussion continues. And so if this was a ground, a first response to this, for students to be able to react to this issue, is it worth mentioning how we might imagine what happens next year?
Well, that's a very interesting question there, Arthur, because I think the subject now, form follows climate in a certain sense transcends just a thematic. It's more of an imperative now, and I think there needs to be this, a shift in the way that as practitioners, as academics, as students, we begin to see the world. That doesn't foreground, technology in a way that, the cultural, the artistic, the spatial, organizational invention that fundamentally lies within the disciplinary knowledge of architecture itself should in any ways be subsumed to that. I think if anything else, we live in far more challenging times, and I think even as students of architecture today, maybe, growing up as architects or being educated as architects, even 25, 30 years ago, a climatic response was an option, right? It wasn't something that seemed to be a kind of imperative. I don't think students today, live in the same world that we did. So I think in a certain sense, they face far greater challenges. And, of course, so do we as practitioners. But I think that awareness is now essentially something which I think is this new juggernaut, which in a certain sense is the kind of underbelly of, examining or thinking about architecture fundamentally. I think we still need to see projects and proposals that are, that rise above, that, begin to imagine the world of tomorrow. And of course, something that is, and I think the other big shift really in a certain sense is this, we can be in a certain sense a lot more frugal in the way that we think about architecture. It almost requires a certain kind of humility now, because it's not just about exotic form, and it's not about the novelty anymore. It's not about the wow architecture. I think it's really now coming to wow now is, how elegant is a building, how sustainable is a building, how does it respond to its context? And I think those are becoming far more powerful questions. And I think in a certain sense, yes, that this becomes a pervasive way to now, I think in a certain sense, think about architecture and design over the next 50 years.
Yeah. And in an extension of that is also the concern and response to place. And
that's right.
The specificity of place, and how a building and a design proposal generates and relates to a place.
Absolutely.
Also, I think that one of the things that we observed, that the students did set out many times to look at climate, and they remained focused on the idea of sun path diagrams and the idea of how sun and light affect the idea of form. What I find that what we also need to become conscious about, and this largely also comes out of the way we look at architecture now, is the role that water will play in constructing the form of a building. And we have enough and ample examples where water becomes also a very important aspect of the idea of climate, and how the experience of water becomes part of our architecture. And I think that is a very critical role of climate. There's an important aspect of climate that we need to start incorporating in the way we look at the buildings.
No, I really just wanted to say that I felt from hearing you all speak just now that it perhaps is also an issue of scale, that, these projects seemed very, very large, perhaps too much to take on in one semester, to do something so all-encompassing, and grapple with that kind of scale. That and you know, I think a design thesis at the undergraduate level really is about ideas that you develop that you can take with you, because that's the kind of time when you can really push an idea for the sake of it, and that you're not battling other issues. And perhaps I think the scale of the projects was way too much. And I don't know whether that is what is happening as part of the kind of curriculum that you're expected to do a very large project. What's happened to doing a small building that can respond to these issues? And I think you know, as I said, at an undergraduate level, that's perhaps all you can take. If you're trying to do something that you know, responding to form follows climate as a provocation, it's something to look back and go back to looking at materials, looking at a smaller scale. I don't know whether that was too much. And so then to answer Arthur's other prompt, like I think yes, to answer you, Arthur, I think the foundation will use this for another year. I think it's worth pushing these ideas, because I think they really, I have great faith in the students, and I'm sure they will come up with really wonderful, but I hope the schools also allow them to do that. So this is a sort of a call out to students, to their advisors, to the schools of architecture, to really allow students to think about this. Because, you know, as Kapil was saying, and everyone's been saying on the jury, that this is not something that's going to go away. And we have to respond, and especially as Charles used to say too, that in India, we have no other option. We, you know, and he was talking about the 60s and 70s and stuff in India. There was not a huge amount of steel or cement, and there definitely wasn't air conditioning and stuff. You know, you had to allow the form of the building to respond to climate. You had to deal with cross ventilation and the Venturi effect, and you had to you used materials and stuff carefully and frugally. And I think it's really important that those things come back, and that's why we had chosen that as a topic this year. And I hope by doing this for another year, maybe we will get you know, better, stronger responses. I'm sure we will.
I'm sure too. Yeah.
So yeah, and yeah, thank you so much to all five of you on the jury, because I know this was a difficult decision for you, and it's more difficult in a way to take this decision of not giving it than to just choose one, you know. And I think that was a very strong stand, and thank you for doing that. And I hope the schools take it as it was meant to be, as a kind of a signal, I think, to really think of what you're asking students in their final semester to do, and what they can take with them.
Yeah.
So thank you very, very much. And just a few other things we as we wind up today, I just want to say that we have a conference coming up, our Z-Axis conference this year. We are going to do it in the month of November, again online, because it's still very difficult to travel and to actually find an auditorium that you can pack with people, you know, cheek and jowl, I think is perhaps sort of almost irresponsible. So we will have it online. It also gives us an opportunity, which we realized 2 years ago, of being able to have a much larger community of people, of, you know, architects, planners, urbanists, whatever, interested public come to attend our conference from all over the country, from all over the world. That's important to us. The global South and all these issues that we are dealing with are important. And so we decided to keep it online again this year. It'll be in November, as I said. It's going to be on Form Follows Climate as Charles's kind of provocation. There was a wonderful essay he wrote in 1980. There were several that led up to this essay of his that appeared in Architectural Record, and that essay is on our website. You can download it and read it, and that will be actually a kind of an outline of what the conference is this year. So we start on November 4th, which is a Friday. It will be the memorial lecture given by Mark Angeli. Mark Angeli is a professor at the Department of Architecture at ETH Zurich, and he's done wonderful work in this topic. So Mark will start it, and then the 3 consecutive Fridays, which is Friday, what is it? Friday the 11th, the 18th, and the 25th of November. And as always, it'll be at 6 in the evening in India, and then accordingly at different times in different parts of the world. So we hope you'll be able to join us. We have more on our website, and we will have registration open quite soon. So we look forward to seeing you all again, and in this celebration of Charles's birth anniversary on the 1st of September. So thank you very much, and bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for having us, Nondita.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nondita, for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.